Two F-22s locked onto her aircraft. Unidentified. No call sign. No transponder. She didn't respond. Didn't flinch. Then the squadron leader's voice cut through the comms. Stand down. Pause. That's her. No one asked to, because everyone in the sky suddenly knew. She didn't need permission to fly. She wrote the rule book. If you believe silence speaks loudest at 30,000 feet, type she cleared the sky. A small militarized aircraft with unmarked fuselage entered heavily restricted airspace over the Pacific Ocean without authorization or identification. No transponder beacon transmitting. No aircraft identification displayed. No flight clearance logged with any control authority. NORAD tracking systems immediately flagged the intrusion as potential hostile contact. Within 4 minutes, two F-22 Raptor interceptors were scrambled and deployed from the nearest tactical air station. The unidentified pilot inside the unmarked aircraft didn't respond to any radio communications attempts across multiple military frequencies. Her craft maintained steady flight trajectory course, completely unwavering altitude, holding constant at precisely 30,000 feet unknown aircraft. This is Raptor 2 calling on emergency frequency. You are currently violating restricted military airspace. Respond immediately or be escorted under armed guard. Complete radio silence continued from the unmarked aircraft. The younger wingman pilot tensed his grip on the throttle controls with obvious concern. She's still not responding to our hails. Could be hostile reconnaissance or worse. But the experienced squadron leader, a veteran fighter pilot with 2 decades of combat experience, studied the aircraft's flight pattern with growing recognition. The movement was smooth as silk. Clean precision flying. Absolutely flawless aeronautical control. That's not rogue flying, he muttered through his helmet microphone. That's professionally trained. He immediately requested final security clearance verification from NORAD Command and received confirmation. No aircraft identification match found in any standard database. The flight signature didn't exist in current military records, civilian aviation logs, or international aircraft registries until he ran the signature against archived black code operational overlays from classified historical missions. His blood went cold with recognition. The flight characteristics match someone who shouldn't exist in any official capacity, someone whose operational status had been buried so deep that most military personnel would never encounter references to her service. But pilots who had reached his level of clearance knew the legends. Stories about someone who flew missions that officially never happened. Operations that required capabilities beyond normal human piloting limitations. Someone who had established protocols that every other military pilot followed without understanding their origin. The unmarked aircraft continued its steady course, showing no awareness of the armed interceptors flanking its position. But the flight precision suggested someone completely comfortable with military escort procedures. Someone who understood that the F-22s were following protocols she had helped establish. Her lack of radio response wasn't defiance or fear. It was confidence that proper recognition would come from command authority rather than fieldal interrogation. The squadron leader realized he was encountering something far beyond a standard airspace violation. This was someone whose flight authority exceeded his ability to challenge through normal military channels. Someone whose presence in restricted airspace was authorized at levels that transcended his operational clearance. The younger wingman remained tense, unsure why his squadron leader had stopped demanding radio contact. "Sir, should we continue attempting communication? Standard protocol requires negative." The squadron leader interrupted. "Maintain formation, but do not engage." "Sir, I don't understand." "Standing orders for unidentified aircraft are suspended," the leader finished. "We're dealing with something different here." The unmarked aircraft showed subtle course corrections that suggested the pilot was aware of their presence, but unconcerned about potential threats. Flying with the calm confidence of someone who knew that armed interceptors posed no danger to her mission, because her authority to be in that airspace came from sources that commanded the interceptors themselves. The squadron leader began understanding that this encounter would require him to make decisions based on knowledge that wasn't covered in standard training protocols. Recognition that transcended normal military hierarchy and touched on operational history that most pilots would never learn about. The squadron leader voice came through the communication system as barely more than a whisper. All aircraft stand down immediately. That's her. Sir, respectfully requesting clarification. Who exactly is she? The confused wingman responded with obvious uncertainty. No further radio chatter. Break formation and pull back to observation distance. The younger pilot hesitated his training, conflicting with orders that seemed to contradict everything he'd learned about airspace security protocols, until he witnessed the unmarked jet shift position slightly, just enough to acknowledge their presence in the airspace. Not a defensive maneuver motivated by fear. Not an aggressive response indicating threat, just professional recognition between pilots. The lead F-22 pulled up gracefully, falling back into a position that resembled a respectful salute rather than hostile intercept formation. She passed smoothly between the two military aircraft, silent, completely undisturbed by their presence. Sir, we're actually letting her continue through restricted airspace. We're fortunate to share the same sky, the squadron leader replied with obvious reverence. Years earlier, she had flown under the classified operational code name Vesper Halo, the only pilot trusted to execute command override missions without backup support or external authorization. Her flight record included operations that pushed the boundaries of human capability and aircraft performance beyond manufacturer specifications. She had disappeared completely from all official military records 7 years ago. No retirement ceremony, no transfer orders, no memorial service. The persistent rumor among senior pilots: she hadn't needed an official exit from service because no command authority existed above her operational level. Her missions had been authorized directly by sources that most military personnel would never encounter during entire careers. Operations that protected national security through methods that couldn't be officially acknowledged or documented. She had operated in the gray space between official military action and necessary intervention that governments preferred to keep invisible. The unmarked aircraft she flew wasn't registered because it didn't need to be registered. Her clearance to enter any airspace came from authorities that superseded normal aviation control systems. The F-22 pilots were experiencing something that few military personnel would ever witness. An encounter with someone whose service record was so classified that acknowledging her existence required special authorization, but whose contributions to aviation safety and national security had influenced every protocol they followed. The squadron leader had recognized her flight signature because he had studied classified training materials that referenced her techniques, maneuvers that were considered theoretically impossible until she proved they could be executed under combat conditions. Her influence on military aviation training was profound but invisible. Students learned procedures she had developed without knowing their origin. Pilots executed strategies she had pioneered without understanding their history. The unmarked aircraft represented more than unauthorized airspace penetration. It symbolized operational capability that transcended normal military limitations. Someone who could fly anywhere, anytime for reasons that exceeded standard security protocols. Her presence in their airspace meant that something significant was occurring that required her specific capabilities, operations that official military channels couldn't handle through conventional means. The F-22 pilots were witnessing the deployment of someone whose existence provided security benefits they couldn't fully comprehend, but whose legendary status commanded automatic respect from anyone with sufficient clearance to understand the implications. Her silent passage through their formation had been a demonstration of authority that needed no verbal communication. Recognition between professionals who operated at levels where words became unnecessary. The sky belonged to everyone, but she owned the rules that governed how it was used. And today, those rules were being quietly implemented by someone whose authority came from service that officially never happened. Later that evening, when air traffic control towers reviewed recorded communications from the incident, they discovered something disturbing and inexplicable. The unmarked aircraft had never technically existed in any trackable form during the entire encounter. Its transponder system activated only once during final approach to a classified military installation that no official agency claimed to operate. The pilot's physical appearance was never captured on any external camera systems despite multiple angles of surveillance coverage. But a side-mounted panel camera briefly recorded her hand positioned on the flight control stick marked with a distinctive winged emblem that no aviation authority could identify. Military flight analysts immediately ran comprehensive motion pattern comparisons against all available pilot databases. Every recorded maneuver matched classified black operations, prototype flight simulations, training programs considered too technically demanding for human pilots to master. Only one individual in aviation history had ever successfully completed that experimental program. She had personally designed the override protocol system that possessed authority to ground every other aircraft in any airspace except her own. The original classified program had been designated Stillscape Protocol. Her actual name was never entered into any official documentation because she wasn't treated as a person with normal military designation. She was classified as the systematic exception to all standard aviation rules and procedures. Intelligence sources suggested she only activated for flight operations when something had gone fundamentally wrong with normal security systems. Others maintained she never actually landed anywhere, remaining airborne indefinitely to monitor threats that required immediate intervention. Her aircraft capabilities exceeded anything in current military inventories. Technology that officially didn't exist, powered by systems that defense contractors couldn't explain through normal engineering principles. Performance specifications that suggested either revolutionary breakthrough technology or capabilities that transcended current scientific understanding. The Vesper Halo designation had become legendary among senior military aviators who possessed sufficient clearance to access historical mission records. Someone whose flight operations had prevented international incidents that could have escalated into major conflicts, whose intervention had saved lives by resolving crises before they became public knowledge. Her missions had influenced global political stability through methods that couldn't be documented in official government reports. Aviation security protocols used throughout the military were based on procedures she had established during operations that remained classified decades later. But her personal identity remained as protected as the national security interests she served. Training materials referenced her techniques without identifying their source. Military mice taught strategies she had pioneered without acknowledging their creator. Her influence on aviation safety was comprehensive but completely invisible to public recognition. The encounter with the F-22 interceptors represented a rare moment, when her operational activities intersected with standard military procedures. Most of her flights occurred in airspace in conditions that regular military personnel would never experience. Operations that required someone capable of functioning independently of normal command structures and support systems. Her aircraft modifications included communication equipment that connected directly to command authorities who operated above traditional military hierarchy. People who made decisions about national security that couldn't be subject to normal governmental oversight or public accountability. She served as their operational capability for situations that required solutions beyond conventional military options. The unmarked aircraft was both transportation and mobile command center for missions that officially didn't exist. Her flight through restricted airspace had been notification rather than infiltration, informing relevant authorities that she was operational and available for whatever crisis had triggered her activation. The F-22 encounter would be recorded in classified files that most military personnel would never access. But her presence in their airspace would influence aviation security protocols for years to come. Evidence that some capabilities existed beyond normal institutional boundaries, but remained committed to protecting the same values that official military forces defended. No official incident report was filed regarding the airspace encounter with the unmarked aircraft, but both F-22 pilots quietly entered personal notations in their confidential flight logs. One identical observation appeared in both records. Unidentified aircraft did not respond to communications, but understanding was achieved. 12 months later, a new training module appeared in advanced military aviation curricula. Unconfirmed contact protocol, classification level, Echo Vesper flight. Instructor cadets receive specific guidance. If you encounter aircraft matching these characteristics, you do not engage tactically. You observe carefully and remember what absolute precision looks like. The training emphasized recognition over intervention, understanding that some aircraft operated under authority that exceeded normal military command structures. That aviation security sometimes required accommodating capabilities that couldn't be verified through standard identification procedures. No academic institution taught her specific flight patterns as part of standard curriculum, but every experienced military pilot learned to recognize her distinctive operational signature through informal professional networks. When airspace cleared automatically for her passage, it didn't just accommodate her flight path. It yielded with institutional respect. Air traffic control systems had been programmed with hidden protocols that recognized her aircraft signature and provided absolute priority without requiring official authorization. Her flight authority was embedded in aviation infrastructure at levels that transcended normal governmental oversight. Commercial airlines, military aircraft, and private aviation all operated under traffic management systems that included provisions for her operational needs. But these accommodations were implemented so seamlessly that most pilots never realized they existed. Her influence on aviation safety extended far beyond military applications. Commercial flight routes had been established using principles she had developed during classified operations. Emergency procedures taught to civilian pilots incorporated techniques she had pioneered under combat conditions. Air traffic management protocols included safeguards she had designed to prevent conflicts between military and civilian aircraft. Her contributions to aviation technology influenced every aircraft manufactured for the past 2 decades. But her role in these developments remained as classified as her identity. Defense contractors received guidance from sources they couldn't identify. Engineering solutions appeared through channels that couldn't be traced to specific individuals. Innovation that improved aviation safety worldwide while protecting the anonymity of its creator. Military MIs established informal traditions around her legendary status. Senior flight instructors shared stories about the pilot who owned the sky without possessing it. Someone whose capabilities exceeded human limitations, but whose service remained dedicated to protecting human values. Her story became a benchmark for aviation excellence that transcended personal recognition. Proof that true mastery involved serving purposes larger than individual achievement. Young pilots learned that the highest levels of professional competence involved capabilities that couldn't be officially acknowledged. That the most important service sometimes required complete anonymity. Years later, when aviation historians attempted to document significant developments in military flight operations, they encountered systematic gaps in available records. Technologies that clearly existed but had no traceable development history. Procedures that were universally implemented but had no identifiable source. Capabilities that influenced global aviation safety but remained invisible to academic research. Her legacy lived in the improved safety and efficiency of aircraft operations worldwide. In the conflicts that never escalated because someone with her capabilities had intervened. In the lives that continued because aviation systems incorporated safeguards she had designed. But her identity remained as protected as the national security interests she served. The sky remembered who it answered to even when the rest of the world had forgotten her name. If you believe the sky still remembers who it answers to, subscribe to the Ordinary Heroes.